All right, let's dive in. Today, we're taking on some pretty big ideas. Human evolution, the way we see the world, and maybe even God.
Yeah, it's a wild ride for sure. Exploring how these amazing brains of ours, capable of so much, actually came about through evolution. We're going to be using some really cool source material for this one. Really gets into how the cortex developed, the role of, social structures, all that.
And get this, the source material, it actually suggests that wanting to own ideas, like intellectual property, wanting that edge, might have actually helped our brains evolve.
It makes you think, all right, like, did our ancestors being ambitious actually, make us smarter?
Definitely food for thought. So the source material traces the cortex, its origin, back about 100 million years.
Wow.
Yeah, way back.
Yeah.
And initially, a larger cortex, it helped animals survive because they could adapt to their surroundings better. Imagine like early mammals, sort of like a cat nowadays, building this mental map of their territory.
Okay, I can see that. Figuring out, okay, this path leads to food, this one's dangerous. That ability to learn and adapt from experience, that was like game-changing.
So bigger brain equals better chances of survival. Makes sense. But then it gets really interesting when the source material connects how fast the human cortex grew to the whole development of social hierarchies.
Right. Think about it. When these social structures start forming, the drive to climb that ladder, right, get more resources, higher status, that would become super intense.
Yeah.
Those who could outsmart their rivals, think strategically, maybe even be a little manipulative.
Oh, come on.
Hey, it's all part of the game. They would have had a big advantage, right?
So we're saying ambition, maybe even a bit of cunning, helped make us smarter. Not exactly the things we usually think about when we talk about, like, the good stuff in human evolution.
Exactly. Challenges that whole idea that evolution is just about surviving in the physical world, right? What if navigating, like the social scene, all that complexity, the power dynamics, what if that played just as big a role? The source material makes a really strong case for this.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Yeah.
But how do we go from a bigger brain to understanding the universe, pondering if God exists? How do we get there?
Well, the source material introduces a concept that might help bridge that gap. The map is not the territory.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an idea popularized by this guy, Alfred Korzybski, and it builds on Plato's allegory of the cave. It basically highlights that we experience the world through our own mental maps, our interpretations, not like directly experiencing reality itself.
So even with our super evolved brains, we're not actually seeing the world as it truly is. Kind of a bummer.
In a way, yeah. Our brains are constantly creating these representations, simplifying and categorizing information. It's all about efficiency.
I can see that.
These mental maps are crucial for everyday life, but they are just maps and not the actual territory.
Okay, can you give me an example so to make this like a little more real?
Sure, think about language. We might think a word has a specific meaning, right? But then get all upset when someone uses it differently.
Right.
Shows how attached we are to these shared representations, even though they're like mental constructs, not absolute truths.
So to be a good critical thinker,
Yeah.
you got to understand that your view of the world is just one interpretation, not the whole picture.
Exactly. And this concept, it's key to approaching the ideas in the source material with an open mind. We got to remember, our understanding is always changing, just like we are. And this leads us to, well, another pretty wild idea from the source material, the concept of an infinite size range.
Okay, infinite size range. I'm intrigued, but also a little intimidated. Where do we even start with that?
So picture this, right? A diagram, size on one axis, time on the other, extending infinitely both ways.
Oh yeah, I'm picturing it.
This size range, it includes everything from tiny, tiny subatomic particles to those massive, cosmic structures in the universe.
Oh.
And each size, it only exists because of the smaller and larger scales around it.
So it's like zooming in and out forever. There's no end, no matter which way you go.
Exactly. It challenges our usual way of thinking, right? Like beginnings and endings, that straight line. The size range, it's more about a continuous back and forth between scales, like a constant zoom in and out through reality itself.
Okay, I think I'm getting it, but why is this so important? What does it tell us about us or the universe?
It makes us rethink our place in the grand scheme of things. If this size range is truly infinite, then what we see as huge and immense could be minuscule from a different point of view. And what we think is tiny, insignificant, could contain entire worlds at a different scale.
Whoa, that's a big thought. Does this idea, this infinite size range, connect to what the source material says about evolution?
It definitely gives us a broader context to understand our own evolution. If we think of this SizeRange like a backdrop of all existence, then life appearing, then eventually us, human consciousness, it becomes a product of this giant interconnected web of scales.
Yeah.
It's humbling, isn't it? Realizing we're part of something so much bigger than ourselves.
It is. It really puts things in perspective. It makes me wonder, if the size range is infinite, could life, even consciousness, exist at scales we can't even imagine? Like, what if there are civilizations inside a single atom?
It's mind-blowing, right? The source material doesn't really get into aliens specifically, but it definitely opens up all sorts of possibilities. If the size range really has no limits, then the conditions for life as we know it, or even life as we don't know it, could exist in ways we can't even comprehend right now.
That's pretty incredible to think about. Almost makes searching for aliens on other planets seem kind of, I don't know, limited.
It definitely broadens the search. But even beyond aliens, the infinite size range, it makes us rethink what reality even is. And that leads us to another big concept from the source material: energy, mass, spacetime.
Okay, now we're really getting into the deep end. What exactly is energy, mass, spacetime?
It's the idea that energy, mass, spacetime, they're not separate things, but actually interconnected parts of a single unified concept. You've probably heard of Einstein's famous equation, E=d4.
Yeah, vaguely. It's something about energy and mass, right?
Exactly. And that equation, it's the foundation for this whole idea. It shows how energy and mass, they can be converted into each other, linked by the speed of light squared. But the source material takes it further, suggests that energy and mass are totally intertwined with space-time itself.
So instead of thinking of space and time as like a container for everything else, it's more like they're active players in like the fabric of reality.
Exactly. The source material even argues that the way space-time is, it needs energy and mass to exist. It's like saying the very structure of reality demands something to be in it, and that something is energy mass.
Hold on, so are we saying the Big Bang, that event that supposedly started the universe, wasn't just some random explosion,
Yeah.
but a direct result of like the way reality itself is?
That's the implication, yeah, and a pretty profound one. The source material suggests the universe didn't just begin the way we normally think about it. It came out of the essential nature of this energy mass space-time.
Wow, my mind is officially blown. It's like our whole understanding of the universe is being flipped upside down.
And that's what these big ideas do. They shake up our assumptions, make us consider new possibilities.
Whoa, wait, we haven't even talked about God yet. Does this whole energy mass space-time thing even allow for a higher power?
That's where things get even more interesting. The source material dives into these philosophical ideas, distinction and anti-distinction. Distinction is about separateness, seeing the world as all these individual objects, beings. Anti-distinction, it's about oneness, unity, a reality where everything's connected.
Okay, I'm following so far, but how does that connect to God?
The source material says we can't truly represent reality because it is this anti-distinction, this unified whole. But our brains, they're wired for distinction, for seeing things as separate. Makes it really hard, maybe impossible, to truly grasp what reality is.
So are we saying our brains being wired to see separate things prevents us from understanding that everything is actually one?
That's one way to look at it. And this idea, this all-encompassing connected reality, that's where the source material links to monotheism, the concept of God.
So instead of a guy with a beard up in the clouds, God is more like the underlying essence of everything, the unity we can't fully understand.
Exactly. And this challenges the traditional ideas of a personal God, one who makes rules, intervenes in our lives. If God is this infinite size range, this energy mass space-time, then those ideas might need some rethinking.
Okay, I'm definitely going to need some time to digest all this, but what does it all mean for us here on Earth trying to figure out our lives?
It means we have a deeper understanding of how humans evolve, not just the biology, but as a result of the fundamental forces that shape reality itself. It gives us a way to think about what reality is, the limits of how we perceive things, our place in this vast cosmic scheme.
So even though we may not fully grasp the infinite size range or what energy mass spacetime truly is, we can still appreciate the incredible journey that brought us into being.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe the most important thing is we're still evolving as individuals, as a species. Our understanding of the universe is constantly growing. And with that, our ability to feel wonder, to be amazed.
That's a great point. It's like we started by looking at the human brain up close, then zoomed out to the whole universe and the forces that shape it.
In a way, yeah, that's exactly the journey the source material takes us on, from how the cortex evolved to these massive ideas, the infinite size range, energy mass space-time.
It's a lot to process, but it's also really exciting. Makes you realize Human evolution, it's not just about physical changes. It's about, like, consciousness itself expanding.
And the source material, it stresses that expansion is still happening. We're not done evolving. Our brains, how we understand the universe, even our idea of God, it's all constantly changing.
But if our brains are wired to see separation, to put things in categories, to simplify, how do we even begin to grasp this anti-distinction, this ultimate unity? Seems almost impossible.
It is a challenge, for sure, but the source material does offer some ideas. It suggests things like meditation, which can quiet the mind, help us get past all the mental chatter, might allow us to experience that sense of oneness.
So it's not just about understanding these concepts in our heads, it's about actually feeling them.
Exactly. And this is where the source material takes a really interesting turn. It argues that the drive to own intellectual property, remember we talked about that earlier, how it might have actually pushed brain evolution forward?
Yeah.
Well, it says that might be a sign of us wanting connection, wanting to overcome that feeling of separation.
Wait, how does wanting to own something connect to wanting unity? Those seem like opposites.
Think about it this way. When we say we own an idea, we're basically saying, this came from me. It's a part of me. It's like
Right.
trying to extend ourselves outward to connect with something beyond us. But the source material, it suggests that real connection, it can't happen through owning or controlling. It can only happen when we recognize that everything is already connected.
So maybe wanting to own intellectual property, that was a necessary step in our evolution. But to truly connect, we need to move past that.
That's a really interesting interpretation, and it brings us back to the infinite SizeRange. If everything really is interconnected, then those boundaries we see between us and others, between the owner and the owned, they start to disappear. We start to see ourselves as part of something bigger, a whole web of relationships that extends infinitely.
This has been an amazing deep dive. We've explored how the human brain evolved, the limits of our perception, the vastness of the cosmos, even the nature of God. I feel like I've learned so much, but also have way more questions now than I did before.
And that's the beauty of it, right? This deep dive wasn't about giving you all the answers. It was about sparking that curiosity, encouraging you to keep exploring these ideas on your own.
So if you're listening to this and your mind is buzzing, that's a good thing. It means you're really engaging with the material, pushing the boundaries of your own understanding.
Remember, the journey of discovery, it never really ends. The more we learn, the more we realize how much there still is to learn.
And maybe, just maybe, as we keep evolving, keep expanding our consciousness, we'll start to grasp the true nature of reality, that interconnectedness that the source material points to.
Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, keep diving deep.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible adventure. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the unknown.